Welcome back to my standing. It's been a while. Yes, hello to you too. And well, times are have been rough for everyone lately, so I hope everyone who is watching right now is safe. If you are in isolation, you are making yourself busy with a book, a game, song, anything. You're not alone, and I wanted to do a reading on the camera. So, me and this fluffy little wiener dog named Tara, well, she will be helping, I will be reading. We will be reading a Strike at Shayol Ghul, a Robert Jordan short story, which is a framed non-fictional in-universe but fictional prequel to Wheel of Time. So allow me, for a word, this is just for words from Robert Jordan. Sometimes fans ask me whether I mean to write prequels to the Wheel of Time. While some requests are for books about the Trolloc Wars, or the rise and fall of the High King, Arthur Hawking, or the life histories of various characters, the most frequent are for books about the Age of Legends and its end in the War of the Power. And the most often asked question is, I believe, why, when the greatest feats of the Age of Legends were done by men and women working together with one power, was the final attack on Shayol Ghul carried out by men alone? At present, I do not intend to write any of those books, but I won't say that a story or two might not creep out eventually. I do not normally do short fiction. My editor claims that for me, a short story means 50,000 words. As for the question though, I hope that those fans and the rest of you will be satisfied for the time with what follows. A fictional bit of non-fiction, a piece from an age called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past. The Strike at Shayol Ghul, a preliminary introduction by Joriel Mundevin. Royal Historian to the Court of Her Most Illuminated Majesty, Atheniel Kirokon Materasu. By the blessing of the light, Queen of Candor, Protector of the Land, Shield of the North, High Seat of House Materasu. One of the most important finds of recent years, perhaps since the breaking, is a partial copy of no less than a history of the world from the drilling of the bore into the Dark One's prison to the end of the breaking of the world. The original apparently dated from early in the 1st century AB. Despite the extreme paucity of material from the entire first millennium after the breaking, we can only be thankful that the art of printing survived the breaking of the world when so much else did not, and was indeed practiced to some extent during the breaking itself, though under severe and restricted conditions. Considering the widespread destruction of the Trolloc Wars and the War of the 100 Years, which, although far less than the near totality of the breaking still saw cities, nations, and far worse, knowledge, go to the fires, we must marvel at any writing that has survived more than 3,000 years. What we know is based on fragments, copied and recopied 1,000 times, but at least we know something from them. Even a little knowledge is better than ignorance. Discovered in a dusty storage room in Chachin, the pages were in chests full of old bills and receipts, students' copybooks and private diaries, some so foxed by age and with ink so faded as to be unreadable where the pages themselves had not crumpled. The fragmentary manuscript was readable, barely, but presented the usual problems, quite aside from the difficulties of translation and dealing with centuries of copyists' errors, such as history would no doubt be a vast, multi-volume work. Please see the author's note at the end. This was in brackets. Yet, of the 212 surviving pages, the largest number of consecutive pages, number 6, and nowhere else more than 2. Such dates as are given are totally incomprehensible, as no calendar dating from the Age of Legends has ever been found. Many references to cataclysmic events, brackets, dire battles and cities destroyed by balefire during the War of the Shadow, whole regions covered by the sea and mountain ranges raised overnight during the breaking, and brackets, and to such minutiae as the appearance of a certain person are but curiosities. The pages which might reveal exactly where these things happened, what their special significance was, the resolution or end result, are usually missing. Why then is this collection so important? First, because, sundered as it is, it contains more information of the War of the Shadow than any other known single source, perhaps as much as all other sources combined in some ways. But even more importantly, it gives a great deal of information available nowhere else. And most importantly of all, the 6 consecutive pages and other which must be placed close to them contain the only known account of events surrounding what surely must be the most far-reaching single event in the history of the world in any age, which was the sealing of the bore by Louis Terran Telamon and the 100 Companions. We still cannot be certain how long passed between the creation of the bore and the actual beginning of what would come to be called the War of the Shadow. Yet plainly at least 50 years and possibly more than 100 were marked by a rapid decline in the social order and an equally rapid increase in 1,000 ills that previously had been either rare or entirely unknown. War itself was a new discovery, it seems, though one quickly learned, some might even say perfected. The War of the Shadow tilted one way, then another, in fire and blood over its course. During the first 3 years, the Shadow made great gains, and large parts of the world fell beneath the horror of the Dark One's dominion, however indirectly through human representatives. And surely, the presence of the Murdrol and Trollocs cannot be called indirect. Under the leadership of Louis Terran Telamon, the legendary dragon of the prophecies, much of what had been lost was retaken over the next 4 years, though not without reverses. At that point, a stalemate developed, and for nearly a year neither side was able to effect any gain, despite fierce fighting. But when the stalemate broke, the Shadow began to advance again, slowly at first, but with ever-increasing speed. According to the writer of that fragmentary history, it was as if every step forward by the Shadow scattered the spores of chaos before it, and feeding on what grew, the Shadow gained strength, so that its next stride was longer, and the next step would be longer still. Huge areas had been devastated to varying degrees by this time as the war surged back and forth around the world. And it was obvious that while the Shadow was willing to starve or murder a great percentage of the population in conquered territories, the forces of the light could no longer sustain a protracted war. They were losing, being pushed toward inevitable defeat with increasing speed, and if they were to win at all, it must be done quickly. One of the plans for ending the war quickly, proposed by Louis Terran, centered around a direct attack on the bore itself. 7 focus points, there seems no better translation from the old tongue, although they're obviously the seals of legend, were constructed of Kundilar, a raiding force so they called it, though even in the light of recent past events, it must still seem a large army to most people of this day. A raiding force consisting of some 20,000 soldiers to provide security, and a circle of 7 female Aes Sedai and 6 male, the minimum number believed necessary, and all the strongest who could be found, would travel to Shayol, the one place on Earth where what has been called a thinness in the pattern makes the bore detectable, and there to implant seals held by the focus points, which would close up the bore and shut the Dark One from the world once more. This plan was considered risky for a number of reasons. Even today, it is known that the Dark One has a certain degree of effect on the world close around Shayol, and it was probable that any attempt to channel there would be instantly detected and the raiding party destroyed. Louis Terran himself, who intended to personally lead this huge raid, admitted that even with success, he expected few of the attackers to survive, perhaps none. Worse, several experts claimed that if the seals were not placed with exact precision, the resulting strain would, instead of sealing up the bore, rip it open, freeing the Dark One completely. Another plan at the time centered around 2 huge sangreal, one attuned to Saidin and one to Saidar, both so powerful that using them required special terangreal, like miniature versions of the Great Sangreal, constructed especially for the purpose of accessing the Sanangreal. This project had its detractors too, for the Sanangreal were planned to be so powerful that either one might well provide enough of one power to destroy the world, while both together certainly would. Some doubted that so much of the one power could be handled safely under the circumstances. Against that was the certainty, according to the plan's supporters, that used together they would provide sufficient power to drive the Shadow's forces back, to defeat them completely and erect a barrier around Shayol until a safe method of dealing with the bore was assured. Detractors pointed out that the bore has enlarged since it was first drilled, and behind the barricade erected by the Sanangreal it would continue to grow, so that eventually the Dark One might free himself within the barrier. The barrier might well contain the Dark One when all he could do was reach through the relatively small bore, but couldn't hold back the Dark One let loose. The whole of the servants quickly divided into 2 camps, and those who favored one plan derided the other. Support for the use of the Great Sanangreal and opposition to attempting to implant the seals centered around a woman named Latra Posse de Cume. Apparently a speaker of considerable force and persuasion, she gathered a large block around her, but what assured her victory was an agreement she reached with every female Aes Sedai of significant strength on the side of the light. In manuscript, this agreement is called the Fateful Concord, though it was doubtful that this was the name it is generally known. Louis Terran's plan was too rash, too dangerous, and no woman who agreed to the Concord would take part in it. As precise placement of the seals was widely thought to require a circle, that apparently killed the plan. Since men cannot create a circle, it can only be brought into one created by women. Work on the Sanangreal in the form of 2 huge statues was rushed forward. Just as the paired Sanangreal were completed, disaster struck. The excess terangreal were being made at a place far removed from the Sanangreal, apparently because of the danger of uncontrolled resonances during the final stages, whatever that means. And that region was overrun by forces under Samael. The only good point in it was that the terangreal themselves had been hidden and the place where they were made destroyed. Its very existence had been a secret at the highest level all along, so that neither Samael nor anyone else for the Shadow knew that any of these things were now within their grasp. The side of the light still had the Sanangreal, but no safe way to access them. Without the Terangreal, it was certain that even the strongest Aes Sedai would be burned out instantly by the huge flow of the One Power. Louis Theron argued again for his plan, acknowledging the risks but saying that was now only the chance, yet Posey maintained her position. Belief in the danger of misplacing the seals had spread, and many more female Aes Sedai had pledged to the fateful Concord, including a great number who were nowhere near strong enough to qualify for the raiding party circle. Tempers and passions rose, and an apparently unprecedented division along male-female lines began to develop among the Aes Sedai in general, if not within the Hall itself. Finally, the Hall decided to continue with the Latra Posey's plan, and her people began working to smuggle the excess Terangreal out of shadow-controlled territory. Almost immediately on the heels of the Samael's advance, armies commanded by Demandred and Bilal struck heavily. At this point in the war, halting an advance by the Shadow was the best that could be hoped for. No conquered territory had been regained in the past 2 years. In intense and bloody fighting, these two drives were barely contained, but Demandred and Bilal kept the pressure on. Samael began a new offensive, also scarcely held, and there is mention of heavy military activity elsewhere. Apparently, both of the Great Sanangreal were threatened by these offensives. In fact, it was possible that they were the target. Massive riots swept a number of cities still held by the Light, and the re-emergence of the Peace faction is mentioned. Apparently, a group of demanding negotiations with the Forsaken. The final defeat was at hand. The will of the people to resist was fading, and should any of the three major offenses committed by the Forsaken break through the end, it would be the only matter of time, perhaps as little as months. With Latra Posey's opposition continuing in the face of these events, and the female Aes Sedai holding to their pledge and thus making use of a circle impossible, the lines of division had hardened to a point where many female Aes Sedai refused to speak to male Sedai, and the reverse as well. Louis Theron resolved to carry out his plan without the approval of or even approaching the Hall. Plainly, it was going to be impossible to hold the huge Sanangreal long enough for the excess Terangreal to be smuggled out. In Louis Theron's view, there was no longer any choice. A group of powerful young male Aes Sedai, vocal in their arguments, apparently to the point of several times disrupting meetings of the Hall, had formed in support of Louis Theron during the struggle with Latra Posey, a group of popularly called the 100 Companions, though in actuality they numbered 113 at this point. As the highest military leader for the Light, Louis Theron was able to assemble a force of some 10,000 soldiers, unbeknownst to the Hall. With that force and the 100 Companions, he launched his planned attack at Shayol. Exactly what occurred that day can never be known, only the results. Of the soldiers, not a single man or woman returned to give any account. The seals were placed safely, without ripping open the Dark One's prison, as many opponents have feared. By chance, all 13 of the Forsaken were at Shayol, perhaps summoned for a conference with the Dark One, and they were trapped in the ceiling, thus decapitating at one stroke the Shadow's leadership. Though most of the world was held for the Shadow, if that had been the whole result, it is certain that over the next few years the Shadow would have been extinguished across the face of the earth. Civilization had retained a large degree of cohesion in the areas held by the Light, far more so than in those held by the Shadow. Deprived of their highest levels, and also perhaps because of the loss of the Dark One's influence, the Shadow Sworn fell into struggles among themselves for power, dividing into warring vulnerable well before the breaking progressed to a point that made the war the least anyone's concern. In any case, the War of the Shadow must be said to have ended that day at Shayol, so it is generally recorded. But that was not the only result, of course. Instead, there was the counterstroke from the Dark One at the moment of sealing, and Saidin itself was tainted. Louis Terran and the 68 survivors of the 100 companions went insane on the instant. Within days, they were leaving trails of death and destruction in their paths. By the time the taint on Saidin was discovered, hundreds more male Aes Sedai had been driven mad, and what remained of civilization after the war itself had fallen into chaos. Even informing all the remaining sane male Aes Sedai of the danger was now impossible. That fateful day at Shayol ended the war and began the breaking of the world. The most suitable comment surely comes from what appears to be the introduction of the fragmentary manuscript. Whoever read this, if any remain to read it, weep for us who have no more tears, pray for us who are damned alive. Author's note: all volumes of the complete history of the War of the Shadow and the breaking of the world will be available by subscription upon application to Mistress Joril Mondevin at the Palace of the Aedeshan in Chachin. End notes. Speculation of the wilder sort is rife among some who call themselves historians, and discovery of this material has resulted in the expected from the usual quarters. Would the great Sun Angrial have proven effective use as Patra Posei desired? Had the seals been placed by a circle comprised of men and women together, might the men, or even Saidin itself, have been protected in some fashion from Dark One's counterstroke? Or would Saidar have been tainted as well? The last possibility is enough to curdle the coldest blood. Yet the fact is that events that transpired as they transpired, and such speculation is no more than a fireside game to frighten the gullible. Those I speak of will know who I mean. According to the manuscript pages, all of the agents responsible for the smuggling were caught, though that was not known until events had far outrun anyone's plans. They were brave men and women, for although those who were not killed outright were tortured, and though some revealed the purpose of their mission, none betrayed the location of any of the Axis Terangrial. Still, the only real result was that Terangrial were widely scattered across areas held for the Shadow, their locations and even their existence to remain hidden for millennia. The manuscript indicates that there were several peace factions during the course of the war, or perhaps only one, with fortunes that waxed and waned. It's clear that several times during the war this group sent parties at its own initiative to the Forsaken, seeking a negotiated settlement, and that upon returning, members of each of these delegations were later discovered carrying out activities that aided the Shadow's cause, though it seems that in some instances they were completely unaware of what they had done. It is a wonder that those people did not remember a saying that is supposed to have originated during the War of the Shadow: there is never peace with the Shadow. Before her death during the breaking, which cannot be specified from the evidence of the manuscript, unfortunately either as to time or place, Latra Posei apparently rose to prominence which rivaled that of Louis Terran before her. During the fighting against the Shadowsworn, before the breaking put an end to what by times seemed inconsequential by comparison, she gained the name Shadar Nor, best translated as Cutter of the Shadow, or perhaps Slicer of the Shadow. The difficulties of precise translation from the Old Tongue, with all its multiple meanings, will always remain with us. It is thus ironic that no other document yet discovered so much as mentions her by name or accomplishments. Perhaps this will serve to restore La Chapousse's Decume to her proper place in history. And that would be all. So, many questions and some revelations which I did not know at this point in time. Apparently, male channelers can only join a circle of female channelers if brought in. And I find, well, both of us, those who have not read all of the Wheel of Time books, I don't know if it's revealed at the very end, but now I know that Lewis Terran had more than 100 of his heroes, and they all went mad instantly. We don't know how exactly the male counterpart of One Power, Saidin, was corrupted. But we do know that it happened instantly. It was not a process. At current point in time, we know that those male channelers, they go mad gradually. They don't go mad instantly. Here they all went mad momentarily. Maybe that's because they were at the source. They were exposed completely. Or maybe during centuries that passed and went away, that whole bond lessened. Who knows? We also find out that apparently there was this person who was of the same renown as Lewis Terran. And Lewis Terran is, in my eyes, more than just a folk hero. He is an equivalent of savior of every single hero combined. He is in the embodiment of light. And this other person, what was her name? Latra. Records of her existing are just completely erased from history. Something that I really enjoy about these in-universe pieces of fiction written in a non-fiction way is that they, if you are inclined, like I am, and I am going to assume like a lot of Wheel of Time fans are, if you are inclined to enjoy every tidbit of world building on the same level, if not more, as characters, they can really deepen your appreciation of world building, because it means that the author really thought, really worked, really tried to flesh out the universe they're creating. My number one example of this will always and forever, of course, will be the Chronicles of Princess Irulan at the beginning of Dune. Every chapter of Dune begins with an excerpt of Irulan's writing about the life of Muad'Dib. And this is not quite it, because it's a separate short story, but the way it's written in universe about other historians existing, it has this academic quality to it that I really enjoy. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed my reading. I'm by no means any sort of narrator or voice actor or anything of the sort. I just wanted to offer a 30 minutes of Wheel of Time talk. Wash your hands, which I'm sure you already do because I know you're smart, and stay safe. I dearly hope that everyone is safe, healthy, and if they're not, that I wish them speedy recovery. And have a wonderful day or night or evening. And see you next time very soon. Bye bye.